Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and today I want to talk about why Donald Trump is on track to crush Joe Biden in the 2024 presidential election. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new, and make sure to go ahead and follow the Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And so pretty much guys, as of right now, Donald Trump is expected to win the electoral college pretty easily. If you look at polling data, as of right now, according to the five-way race, which includes the third-party candidates, currently has Trump up by almost 3 percentage points. And at this day in 2020, Biden was currently leading the aggregate by 4.7%. So around his actual, performance of what he ended up getting in the popular vote, the polling at this point was pretty accurate. And so if we were to kind of go off a metric and say, okay, let's say the May polling tends to be pretty accurate because it did have the popular vote at 4.5. And basically the margin was 2.7 on that same day. And so if you're really looking at it that way, if the polling is accurate, going into the election, Donald Trump is expected to win the popular vote by around 2.7%. The approvals are actually not even that deviated from each other at all. Donald Trump currently sits at a 43.1% approval rating. And right now, Biden is at around 40.6%, or around, I think it was 40.3 actually. And he sits at around, Trump's ahead 2.8 points in favorability, and favorabilities tend to gauge really well what share of the national popular vote they're going to get. So for this bottom portion of my model, I'm using that to project the popular vote, and the polling and the projected popular vote are actually pretty in line with each other. And Biden's approval rating has recovered around 2 points, in the past week and a half or so. But Donald Trump is still expected to win this race fairly easily as of right now. And what's pretty interesting to look at this is that Donald Trump, has been historically, underestimated in polling data. And I'm going to show you guys, why, theoretically in this scenario, it would make sense for a scenario like this to happen based on the current polling that we have. Right now, Donald Trump would more than likely take all the Great Plains states back, the Appalachian states. These would be, solid states for the former president. He won all of these in 2020 by pretty decisive margins, and I wouldn't expect anything less from him this time around. None of them are going to really trend to the right, to the left by a very considerable amount, to the point where they're going to vote, much closer, or even voting the opposite party. Nebraska's first and Nebraska's at large would end up being safe in this scenario. If we look at the safe Democratic states, California is a safe Democratic state, around a 17-point victory as of right now. If we look at the results, it's actually exactly at 17 points. If you look at DC, Maryland, Massachusetts, Vermont, these are going to be safe, including Connecticut and Rhode Island. These are going to be over 10-point victories for the incumbent president, as well as the state of New York. It actually only sits at an 11.8 percentage point victory for Biden, which is an extremely bad look, on, his presidency. The fact that he can't even win the state of New York by over 20 points, is a huge, bad warning sign for the incumbent president. Iowa and Ohio would end up being safe states. They're both projected to be, 16 points, respectively. They're pretty in line with each other. Ohio basically votes to the left of Iowa by 0.2% in the model, just like how it did in 2020. So the voting patterns are going to stay pretty similar. Even in 2016, Iowa voted slightly to the right of Ohio, in this scenario, and they kind of voted in line with each other in 2020. And I expect Trump to do pretty good here as well. They trended to the right in 2020, and I expect them to trend heavily to the right again in this favorable national environment. And Texas and Florida are also expected to go in the safe column as of right now for the former president. He is winning Texas by 13.4%. He's ahead in Florida by 12.9%. He's expected to score really huge victories in all of these states. He's posing double-digit victories here, which would be really impressive for the former president, considering that, Florida last cycle was a 3.4 percentage point victory for him. He won the state of Florida in 2016 by just a mere 1.2%. If we look at the margin here, about a 1.2 percentage point victory for Donald Trump in this scenario. And so Donald Trump's already at 219 safe electoral college votes. I also forgot to fill out Maine's first being a safe Democrat. The likely, and as well as Hawaii, likely Democratic states would include states like Oregon, Washington. They're going to fall under 10 points according to the model. We can see here that as of right now, Washington is a likely state. The state of Oregon is also going to be a likely Democratic state as well, putting those, in somewhat competitive ranges, but still, pretty comfortable for Biden. Colorado and Illinois are actually the exact same margin. They are both voting for Biden by 5.7%. Yes, you heard me correctly. Illinois is voting for Biden by 5.7%. It's expected to trend to the right like it has in previous cycles, but due to African American support shifting towards Donald Trump, Hispanic support, and white working class support, you are going to see a major shift in the Midwest, and you're going to see a state like Illinois actually get somewhat competitive to the point where it's actually going to even vote to the right of Oregon in this scenario, and even almost vote to the right of Colorado, which is not very typical of the state. You could see New Jersey and Delaware are likely Democratic states. Delaware is listed here as a 9.3 percentage point victory, which is far closer than the opposed 19-point win that he won it by in 2020. So this is definitely a massive shift in the state. New Jersey was a 15.9 percentage point victory and is listed as a 5.9 percentage point victory. So even Illinois is voting to the right of New Jersey in this scenario, showing that Illinois is having major swings this presidential cycle. And we're coming down to some of the more closer states. But, last time, the last two cycles, we saw Donald Trump, get, pretty close in the Rust Belt. He won Georgia easily, North Carolina pretty easily, Arizona easily. He lost all these swing states by somewhat close margins. But the model suggests that since Trump is leading in the aggregate by so much, since he has a higher favorable than Joe Biden right now, which was not the case in 2020, or he didn't even have a higher favorable than Clinton in 2016, he's expected to win all these races pretty easily. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada are expected to go in the likely column for the former president. Wisconsin, an 8.1 percentage point victory. Pennsylvania, a 7.3 percentage point win. North Carolina, a 9.5 percentage point victory. Nevada, an 8-point win for the former president. Michigan, 6.2 percentage points. Georgia by 7.2, and Arizona by 6.6%. All the model projections kind of align with the polling data and some of the previous polling errors, which I will go over in tomorrow's video more in depth when I do my official prediction. This is kind of just a video explaining how, Trump is basically gonna be on track to win the presidential election in a big landslide. States like Virginia, if we go ahead and look at that, Biden's only winning it by a point and a half, according to the model, which is significantly closer than what it was in 2020. He won it by 10.1%. And we'll see here that that is a really bad warning sign for, the incumbent president. The fact that the model has it within, 5 points, and he won it by a safe margin in 2020 is not a good look for him whatsoever. And if we look at a state like New Hampshire, it's only a tilt margin for Biden. He's winning it by 0.3%, a similar victory to what Clinton won it by in 2016. And if we look at a state like Maine at large, we're going to see Biden's only winning that by 0.7%, which is also pretty interesting. Nebraska's second is expected to flip to the former president, putting him at 313 electoral college votes, posing a very easy victory in the electoral college. And if we look at his last two states here, we're going to see the state of Minnesota voting for Trump by 0.5% as of right now. And the state of New Mexico is actually basically a pure statistical tie, but it is shown that Donald Trump is winning it by around 0.04 percentage points according to the model. So it is a razor thin margin, but he is in fact winning it. It is voting to the right of Colorado by around 5 points in this scenario, actually over 5 points, which is really fascinating to even think about that the state is deviating from Colorado by so much, but this is mainly because Hispanic voters are trending away from the Democratic Party. The state of New Mexico trended to the right compared to Colorado in 2020, majorly because of Hispanic trends. The white vote is actually what keeps the state Democratic, since I believe that Trump's going to gain some of the white vote nationally and gain a lot with Hispanics. I think that's actually going to push the state barely into the Republican column, or at least get it within the competitive range. But the model does actually show it as a competitive state. So states that are basically within the margin of error are New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine at large, and Nebraska is second, which that puts Biden at 191. That puts Trump at 312 electoral college votes. And so even without margin of error room, Donald Trump is already expected to win 312 electoral college votes. So all the states that are decided by less than 5 points would be New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, Maine at large, and Nebraska second, which are all states that voted by a likely margin for the incumbent president. Biden won New Mexico by 10.8. He won Minnesota by 7.1, Virginia by 10.1, New Hampshire by 7.4, Maine by 9.1, and Nebraska is second, being a 6.6 percentage point victory. This closest, state that's within 5 points now, according to the model, was actually Nebraska's second, believe it or not, which is quite interesting. It's actually a lean state for Trump right now. And New Mexico and Minnesota are projected to flip. Virginia is still lean Democrat, with New Hampshire and Maine still tilting to the incumbent president. If these were to flip, that would put Trump at 334 electoral votes. If Minnesota and New Mexico were to hold on for the incumbent president, it would put Biden at 300 and it would put Biden at 225 electoral votes to Trump's 313 electoral college votes. Now, the problem with Donald Trump, and all these people basically saying, oh, well, Biden's going to overperform the polling data. It's going to be impossible for Trump to overperform expectations again. Well, let's say, the polls underestimate Biden by 3 points. So that put the national aggregate at around, minus 1.7, I believe. So you'd have one, two, yeah. Okay, so that puts Biden at 1.7. That shifts the popular vote 3.2 percentage points to the right still. And the national popular vote would also be 1.7. That'd be 3.2% to the right as well. Even in that electoral college scenario, if the polling were to underestimate Biden by that amount, Donald Trump is still posing a very easy victory in the electoral college. Granted, Colorado is safe now. The West Coast would be safe. Illinois would be probably safe. And actually, we could look. It might not even. It's right above a 10-point victory. It's right above it. These northeastern states would still be safe, but would still be closer than 2020. You'd have a lot of basically red states be a little bit more competitive. Ohio and Iowa would be slightly closer, but would still be easy victories. Donald Trump still winning Iowa by 12 points. Ohio would still end up being an 11.8 percentage point victory for Trump. North Carolina would still be an easy victory for Trump. Texas, 8 points. Florida would end up being a 7.9 percentage point victory. So they kind of vote in line with each other. Nebraska's at large, and Nebraska's first would be safe, including Maine at large. I believe it would still be a safe district as of right now. You would see it would be an 11.9 percentage point win. The first district would actually end up voting to the left of what it did in 2020, which is pretty interesting. So that district is trending a Democrat according to the model. However, if we were to keep going, you'd see that there are some major warning signs for Biden here. New Hampshire would still be a lean Democratic state. In this scenario, Minnesota would still be lean Democrat. It'd be a 3.7 win for Biden. New Mexico would be a 5.5 percentage point victory for the incumbent president. Hawaii would presumably be safe in this scenario. Virginia would be a 6.5 percentage point victory for Biden in this scenario. So Trump would still be making gains nationwide, even if the polling underestimated Biden by 3 points. Alaska would be right over that safe margin. You could see Alaska is theoretically trending to the left compared to the rest of the nation. North Carolina is listed as a 4.6 percentage point victory for Biden in this scenario. If we look at the state of Georgia, Donald Trump's actually winning that state by 2 percentage points according to the model. Arizona is a 1.8 percentage point victory for the former president. If we look at Nevada, we'd even see Donald Trump is winning that by around 3 percentage points as of right now. Wisconsin would end up being a 3.8 percentage point victory, so it'd almost be a 4-point win still. Pennsylvania, would end up being, if we find it, 2.9%, so it's actually voting to the right of Georgia, Arizona, and almost even Nevada in this scenario, which is very fascinating to see. And if we keep going, we'll look at Michigan, and we could see it's a 1.8 percentage point victory. Nebraska's second would be a lean Democrat in this scenario, and Maine at large would end up being right under the lean margin, or under the likely margin for Joe Biden. So Donald Trump would still win the election with 312 electoral votes. He'd still be winning it according to my model, even if Biden were to outperform polling by that much. Even if Biden wins the popular vote by the same amount he did in 2020. So let's theoretically hypothesize and say, let's say Biden wins the popular vote by the same amount. So we have the current aggregate, and let's say Biden wins the election by the same amount that he did in 2020. So let's say that ends up happening in this scenario. Donald Trump is still winning the electoral college. He still ends up beating Joe Biden in this election. He still wins. Now, the margins do vary. Virginia is slightly more Democratic. Texas is a little bit closer. Pennsylvania is closer. North Carolina. All the states are theoretically closer. New Hampshire is not even lean yet. Maine at large, or likely, excuse me. Maine at large is exactly 5 points. Nebraska is second. And this scenario would still be lean, including Minnesota, by the way. So these would still be lean states. New Mexico would be a 7-point victory. New Jersey would be an 11-point victory for Biden. North Carolina would still be a 3-point win. Georgia and Arizona would actually be the states that'd be pretty close. They'd be tilt margins for the former president. And if we look at the state of Nevada, we're going to see it's a 1.8 percentage point victory. If we look at Michigan, it's exactly a point victory in the electoral college as of right now. Pennsylvania is also a lean margin still, including the rest of the states. So even if Biden were to be winning the popular vote by the exact same amount he did in 2020, Donald Trump would also still be winning with 312 electoral college votes, with Arizona and Georgia basically being the closest states. So funny enough, this would end up being the map if Biden were to win the lean states. And funny enough, Biden's actually winning. For whatever reason, Georgia's actually closer than Arizona, which is quite interesting. So the next state that Biden would be picking up here is Georgia, which is pretty interesting. But I guess it's that the model's picking up the demographic trends. So that might also be it too. Because the more Republican the popular vote swings, the more I have it where, African Americans are affecting the results and all that kind of stuff. And, Hispanic voters are shifting to the right. So, guys, this just goes to show that even if Donald Trump underperforms, the polling by quite a significant amount, he's still on track to win the electoral college either way. And it's mainly because Biden's approval rating is just in the gutter. It is just doing it's astronomically, horrendous. The polling there is just not great for him at all. This is what the current electoral map looks like as of right now, which is a stark contrast from 2020. And even if Biden were to have the exact same approval rating, let's say, he has the exact same approval rating and he were to win the popular vote by the same amount, Donald Trump still wins the electoral college. He still wins in this scenario. He would actually win it with 270. He'd actually win it by exactly 270 electoral votes. If Biden were to have the exact same approval rating, were to win the popular vote by 4, with the current polling, my model projects that Donald Trump would lose Arizona, would lose Georgia, and lose Michigan, but would not lose Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Nevada. And that would still give him 270 electoral votes. So this just goes to show that Joe Biden is going to have a pretty hard time really making up the math here. He's going to have a hard time really figuring out what he's going to do. And right now, he wants to debate Trump now because he realizes that there's no other path for him. Donald Trump is expected to perform well in the debate. Now, don't fall for the narrative that Biden is gonna absolutely, tank, in the debate performance. Don't fall for that either, because the media wants you to believe that as long as he doesn't crap himself on live national television, that he's gonna do just fine. That's really not true, but they're trying to set the expectation really low for him, but don't fall for that trap. So just don't fall for that. Make sure you're kind of diligent with how you analyze things, because I don't expect Biden to do as bad in the debate as people think, as of right now. And with even if Biden were to have a positive approval rating, he'd still be losing the election fairly easily. He'd still be losing it. I mean, he'd hold on to Minnesota and Nebraska second, and he'd hold on to like New Hampshire, New Mexico, but he would still be losing either way with this aggregate. It would still be a disaster, and him being down, this many points nationwide is really not a great look for him either. And so, guys, that is pretty much it for this video. I just kind of wanted to do an analysis on why Donald Trump is expected to win the 2024 presidential election, and why he's going to potentially win it in a landslide. If you guys did enjoy this video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, make sure to go ahead and follow the Twitter, and join the Discord in the description down below. And I will see you guys very, very soon.